Today's question is, how do religion, the idea of God, and the scientific understanding of the universe truly relate? Are they compatible ways of explaining reality or fundamentally different paths to truth? People come up to me all the time. They corner me at universities, at conferences, even in diners. They say, Professor Feynman, you're a physicist. You've looked at the quantum world. You won the Nobel Prize for figuring out how light and electrons interact. You've looked deep into the mathematical machinery of the universe. So tell us, is there a God? Did somebody make all this? What is the absolute final ultimate truth of the universe? They want a neat little package. They want me to hand them a mathematical equation that either proves there is a grand bearded man in the sky watching over them, or they want an equation that definitively proves there isn't, so they can feel very smart and superior. They want certainty. They are desperate for certainty. They want a warm blanket to wrap around their existential terror so they can sleep peacefully at night. Well, if you're looking for a warm blanket, then go away, because I don't have a warm blanket for you. What I have is a freezing cold, pitch black, infinitely vast expanse of a universe that is so bizarre, so completely alien to human common sense, and so magnificently indifferent to your personal neuroses that it will make your head spin. But if you have the courage to let go of your absolute certainty, if you're willing to stand on the edge of the abyss, look into the terrifying dark and say, I don't know, then stay. Because I promise you, the actual, observable, thrilling reality of our magnificent ignorance is 1 billion times more beautiful than any myth, any fairy tale, or any religious text human beings have ever invented. Let's start with a very simple idea, the idea of beauty. I have a friend who's an artist, and he's got a habit of taking a view which I completely disagree with. We'll be walking along, and he'll hold up a flower, and he'll say, look how beautiful this is. And I'll agree, it's a pretty flower. But then he'll say, I, as an artist, can see how beautiful this is. But you, as a scientist, you take this all apart. You reduce it to its mathematical pieces, and it becomes a dull, mechanical, lifeless thing. I think he's completely nutty. First of all, the beauty that he sees is available to me and to everyone else. I am perfectly capable of appreciating the aesthetics of a flower, the red of the petals, the shape of the stem. But at the same time, I see so much more about that flower than he sees. I can imagine the cells inside. I can see the complicated microscopic actions occurring right there in the leaf. I know that the red color of that flower is a specific wavelength of electromagnetic radiation that evolved over millions of years specifically to attract a certain type of bee or insect. Now think about what that means. That's fascinating. That means insects can see color, which immediately provokes a question. Does an insect have an aesthetic sense? Why does the universe have this rule where biological organisms are attracted to specific frequencies of light? And then I can go deeper. I can look at the molecules making up the cells, the carbon atoms, the electrons buzzing around the nuclei, following the probabilistic rules of quantum mechanics. There is a beauty at the scale of 1 centimeter, yes, but there is also a breathtaking, dizzying beauty at the scale of 1/10 of a millimeter and at the scale of a nanometer. The scientific knowledge, the process of pulling the flower apart, does not subtract from the mystery. It only adds. It adds excitement. It adds awe. It adds a deep structural poetry that my artist friend is completely blind to. I don't understand how investigating nature could ever subtract from its beauty. Now I want you to take that flower and I want you to expand it. Expand it to the size of the entire cosmos. Because this is exactly what happens when we talk about religion and science. The religious person looks at the universe, the stars, the earth, human consciousness, and says, look how beautiful it is. God made it. It's a miracle. Don't take it apart. Don't question it too deeply. You just read the holy book, accept the mystery, and leave it alone, or you'll ruin the divine magic. But the scientist looks at the universe and says, look how beautiful it is. Let's figure out how it works. And when we start looking, when we start pulling the universe apart to see the gears and the springs, what we find is so astonishing, so unimaginably grand, that it makes the ancient religious Stories look exactly like what they are. Stories written by frightened, ignorant people in the Bronze Age who didn't even know where the sun went when it got dark. When people ask me about God, I always have to stop them and say, wait a minute, which God are you talking about? Because there are two fundamentally different concepts of God, and we mix them up all the time. So there is the first God. Let's call him the God of the physicists or the God of the philosophers. This is the idea of a grand architect, the ultimate source of the laws of physics, the prime mover. When a physicist looks at the mathematical rules of nature, when you look at how perfectly gravity curves space-time, or how the strong nuclear force binds protons together, or the elegant symmetry of Maxwell's equations governing electricity and magnetism, you cannot help but be struck by how incredible the rules of the game are. And if you want to look at those beautiful mathematical rules and say, well, a supreme, abstract intelligence must have written them, I cannot definitively prove you wrong. Science cannot disprove the existence of a grand geometrician who wound up the cosmic clock 13.8 billion years ago and simply let it tick. But nobody actually prays to the God of the physicists. Nobody asked the grand geometrician for a bicycle for Christmas. Which brings us to the second God, the personal God, the God of human religions. This is the God who purportedly parted the Red Sea, the God who dictates whether you should eat pork or what day of the week you are allowed to turn on a light switch, the God who cares deeply about who you sleep with and in what position, the God who listens to the prayers of a mother in Ohio asking for her son's football team to win the state championship, while simultaneously ignoring the prayers of a child starving to death in another part of the world. This is the God of the dogma. And this is where, as a man of science, I hit a massive, impenetrable wall. Because when you look at the physical reality of the universe, the idea of this personal God becomes completely, laughably disproportionate. Let me explain what I mean by disproportionate. I want you to really, truly think about the scale of the universe. Just for a moment, step outside your daily routine. Forget about your job, your mortgage, your argument with your neighbor, and look up. You live on a planet, the Earth, and it seems big to it. But the Earth is just a tiny, wet piece of rock orbiting a completely average, unremarkable yellow dwarf star we call the Sun. The Sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth. You could fit 1,000,000 Earths inside the Sun, and our Sun is just one star in our local neighborhood, a swirling galaxy we call the Milky Way. Do you know how many stars are in the Milky Way? 100 billion. 100 billion suns. Many of them are thousands of times larger than our own, burning with a ferocity we cannot comprehend. Our entire solar system is just a speck of dust sitting on the outer spiral arm of this massive galactic pinwheel, a pinwheel so large that it takes light, which travels at 186,000 miles per second, fast enough to go around the Earth 7 times in 1 second. It takes that light 100,000 years just to cross from one side of our galaxy to the other. For a long time, humanity thought the Milky Way was the entire universe. That was big enough, wasn't it? But then in the 1920s, a man named Edwin Hubble looked through a telescope at Mount Wilson in California. He looked at these little fuzzy patches in the night sky that people thought were just clouds of gas within our galaxy. Hubble measured the light coming from them, and he realized a terrifying truth. They weren't clouds of gas. They were other galaxies, completely separate from ours. How many other galaxies are there in the observable universe based on our best modern telescopes? Peering into the deepest, darkest patches of space, we estimate there are roughly 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, each star potentially hosting its own system of planets. We are talking about an expanse of space stretching 93 billion light years across. It is an ocean of cosmic fire and freezing vacuum so vast that the human brain biologically cannot process the numbers. The math just becomes a dull ache in your prefrontal cortex. And then there is the time. Oh, the sheer depth of time. The universe has been expanding for 13 13.8 billion years, for billions of years before the Earth even existed. Giant stars were born in massive nebulas. They burned violently for millions of years, collapsing under their own gravity, and then exploding in magnificent, blinding supernovas. They forged the heavy elements in the universe, the carbon, the oxygen, the silicon, the iron, and scattered them across the dark void. This silent, violent ballet happened over and over and over again. Galaxies collided. Black holes swallowed whole star systems. The universe was boiling and expanding and evolving in the dark for 9 billion years before the cloud of dust that would become our solar system even began to coalesce. Now, take all of that, the 13.8 billion years, the 2 trillion galaxies, the trillions of exploding suns, the infinite freezing vacuum of space, and then look at the religious view of the universe. The religious view insists that the supreme architect of all of this, the entity that engineered the quasars, the black holes, the cosmic microwave background, the quantum fields, created all of that infinite vastness, waited 13.8 billion years just so we could watch a particular species of half-hairless bipedal primates on a tiny, insignificant grain of dust orbiting an average star to see if they would disobey him and eat a piece of fruit from a magical tree. And furthermore, that this cosmic architect is deeply, personally offended if you don't chop off a piece of your foreskin or if you say his name in the wrong tone of voice. Do you see the problem? The stage is simply too big for the drama. The proportions are completely wrong. It is like building a theater the size of the entire solar system with a stage that stretches from here to Jupiter, all to put on a one-act play about a single microscopic amoeba. The scale of the universe that modern astronomy and physics have revealed makes the anthropocentric religious stories look utterly parochial. They look exactly like what they are, local tribal myths, written by ancient human beings who didn't know what a galaxy was, who believed the Earth was a flat disk at the center of everything, and who modeled God after their own local tyrannical kings, a king who gets jealous, who gets angry, who demands praise, who needs blood sacrifices, and who takes sides in human land disputes. When you discover the real universe, the actual universe, the idea that the creator of all this staggering vastness is deeply concerned with the minutiae of human behavior is simply unbelievable. It's an insult to the universe. It's too small an idea for such a grand reality. But it's not just the physical scale that causes a friction between science and religion. There is a fundamental, structural, irreconcilable conflict in the very way these two systems operate. It's a hardware issue. It's an issue of epistemology, how we claim to arrive at the truth. Let's look at the mechanism of science. What is science? A lot of people think science is a big book of facts you have to memorize in high school. That's wrong. Science is not a body of facts. Science is a method. It is a very specific way of thinking, a way of interrogating nature. And the absolute beating heart of the scientific method, the most sacred principle we have, is doubt, uncertainty. In science, we say, I have an idea about how the world works. Let's design an experiment to test it. If the results of the experiment disagree with your idea is wrong. I don't care how beautiful your idea is. I don't care how smart you are, what your name is, or how many degrees you have. If your theory disagrees with the observable experiment, it is wrong, period. That is the ultimate rule. And because of this rule, a scientist must always leave the door open to doubt. Even our most cherished, successful theories, Newton's laws of motion, Einstein's general relativity, the standard model of particle physics, we don't call them absolute, unchangeable, divine truths. We say, these are the best models we have right now. They work incredibly well, but they might be incomplete. Tomorrow, someone might do an experiment in a particle accelerator that shows a flaw in the theory, and we will have to change it. We are comfortable with uncertainty. In fact, we revel in it. Ignorance is the engine of scientific discovery. If we knew the absolute truth about everything, we'd be out of a job. When a scientist looks at a phenomenon they can't explain, they don't panic. They don't fall to their knees and weep. They get excited. They say, I don't know, how wonderful. Let's find out. Now contrast that with the mechanism of religion. It operates on the exact opposite principle. The core mechanism of religion is faith. And what, practically speaking, is faith? Faith is the conscious decision to believe in something despite a complete lack of evidence, or even worse, in the face of actively contradictory evidence. In the religious framework, certainty is viewed as a virtue. To doubt is a sin. To question the word of God or the sacred text or the prophet is a sign of moral weakness. You are commanded to believe without seeing. You are told that the answers were already written down 2,000 years ago by people who thought illnesses were caused by demons, and your only job is to obey. Do you see the fatal collision here? How can a human mind function at its highest possible capacity if it is simultaneously holding on to absolute, unquestionable certainty and absolute rigorous doubt? You can't. If you start an investigation with the premise that you already know the ultimate answer because the Holy Book told you so, you are not doing science, you are doing apologetics. You are working backward from a conclusion, cherry-picking the data that fits your comforting story, and ignoring the vast, messy reality of the universe that doesn't fit. When I was a younger man working on the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos and later doing my research at Cornell and Caltech, I spent my life wrestling with the invisible world, the world of subatomic particles, electrons, photons, muons, quarks. Let me tell you something about the quantum world. It is absolutely crazy. It doesn't make any intuitive sense whatsoever. Down there, at the level of the atom, the laws of classical physics completely break down. Particles can exist in a superposition, meaning they are in multiple states or places at the exact same time. They behave like waves of probability until you measure them, at which point they suddenly snap into being solid particles. Two particles can become entangled, meaning no matter how far apart you separate them, even at opposite ends of the galaxy, a change to one instantaneously affects the other, seemingly violating the speed of light. It is utterly absurd. It defies all human logic. Now imagine if I had approached the mysteries of quantum mechanics with the attitude of a religious fundamentalist. Imagine if I had said, well, the universe must behave according to standard human logic because God made us in his image and God is rational. Therefore, the quantum world must follow the rules of a clockwork universe. If I had done that, I would have failed completely. I would never develop quantum electrodynamics. I never would have understood how light and matter interact. Because nature doesn't give a damn what you believe. Nature doesn't care about your human prejudices, your common sense, or your religious texts. Nature is going to do what it's going to do, and your job as an observer of the universe is to shut up, listen, look at the data, and accept it, no matter how profoundly weird and absurd it seems. Religion demands that the universe conform to a human narrative, a cozy narrative of purpose, of ultimate justice, of cosmic morality, where the good guys get rewarded in paradise and the bad guys burn in a lake of fire. Science looks at the universe and says there is zero evidence of a human narrative out there in the stars. And I know that terrifies people. It really deeply frightens them. People look at the strict materialistic scientific worldview and they panic. And they say, but Professor Feynman, if there is no God, if there is no grand creator writing the rules, if the universe is just a giant, blind, mechanical system governed by cold mathematical equations, then what is the point of it all? Where do we get our morals? If there's no heaven and no hell, why shouldn't I just go out and murder my neighbor and steal his television? What prevents human society from collapsing into total savage chaos? This is a very serious question, and it deserves a deeply serious answer. I think there is a profound historical confusion in our society between the factual claims of religion and the moral values of religion. In the Western world, our moral framework, ideas like love your neighbor, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the concept of charity, the inherent value of the individual life, these ethical ideas were delivered to us historically inside a package, a wrapper of religious mythology. The wrapper included the burning bushes and the virgin birth, the resurrection from the dead, the miracles, and the threat of divine judgment. For centuries, people genuinely believed that you couldn't have the ethical contents without the mythological wrapper. They believed the morality and the magic trick were completely inseparable. If you throw away the belief that in a literal judging God, they argued you throw away the only reason to be a good person. But I think human beings are finally growing up. I think we are reaching a level of intellectual and emotional maturity where we can separate the ethical values of human brotherhood from the dogmatic facts of ancient theology. Think about it logically for just a minute. Do you really need the threat of eternal agonizing torture in a supernatural lake of fire to stop you from killing your neighbor? Do you really need the promise of a golden harp and a mansion in paradise to make you share your bread with a starving child? If the absolute only reason you are behaving as a decent moral person is because you think an invisible, omniscient dictator is watching your every move on a cosmic security camera, ready to punish you if you step out of line, then you aren't actually a good person at all. You're just a frightened, obedient subordinate trying to avoid a beating. That's not morality. That's extortion. True morality doesn't require the supernatural. True morality requires empathy. It requires the rational, observable recognition that we are all stuck on this tiny, fragile rock together, spinning through the freezing, hostile void of space. It comes from the realization that life is incredibly rare, incredibly fragile, and incredibly brief. Look at what science tells us about what we are. Religion says we are made of clay, breathed into by a magical spirit, and given a supernatural soul that exists completely outside the laws of physics. It says we are completely separate from the animals, separate from the earth, given dominion over nature by divine right. Science tells a different story, and frankly, the scientific story gives me far, far more reason to treat my fellow human beings with awe, reverence, and profound respect than the religious view ever did. Science tells us that you and I are literally physically made of stardust. Remember those giant stars I talked about earlier? The ones that burned for millions of years and exploded in supernovas. When they exploded, the extreme heat and pressure fused basic hydrogen and helium into the heavier elements. The iron in your blood that carries oxygen to your brain, the calcium in your teeth and your bones, the carbon that forms the structural backbone of your DNA. Every single atom of those heavy elements in your body was forged inside the nuclear furnace of a dying star billions of years ago. You are not separate from the universe. You are not an alien entity dropped onto this planet by an outside creator. You are a product of the universe. You are the universe. You are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Just sit with that for a second. Imagine the sheer staggering improbability of your existence. Over 13.8 billion years, dead, unconscious matter, blindly following the laws of physics, organized itself into clouds of gas, then into galaxies, then into stars, then into planets. Then on at least one of those planets, in a warm, primordial soup of chemicals, carbon atoms chained together in just the right way to begin replicating. Evolution took hold. Over nearly 4 billion years of brutal, blind, agonizing trial and error, single-celled organisms turned into multicellular life. Fish crawled out of the oceans. Amphibians became reptiles. Reptiles became mammals. Mammals became primates. And finally, the atoms organized themselves into a structure so phenomenally complex, the human brain with its 86 billion neurons and trillions of synaptic connections, that the matter literally woke up. The universe became conscious. It opened its eyes, looked up at the very stars from which it was born, and began to wonder. It began to do mathematics. It began to write poetry. It began to feel love. We are the universe experiencing itself. Doesn't that give you chills? Doesn't that evoke a sense of deep spiritual awe that is just as profound, if not vastly more profound, than walking into a dark cathedral and listening to a man in a robe chant in Latin? When I look at the night sky, I don't see a painted ceiling constructed by an old man with a beard. I see my own origin. I see a vast, ancient, dynamic, terrifyingly beautiful system of which I am an integral, temporary, completely astonishing part. Ah, the religious person says, but what about the soul? What about life after death? Professor Feynman, your science gives us no hope for eternity. Science says that when you die, your brain stops functioning, your consciousness vanishes, and you just rot in the ground. That's entirely too depressing to accept. Is it? I honestly don't think it's depressing at all. In fact, I think the absolute frantic insistence on human immortality is a symptom of incredible, unwarranted arrogance. We are so self-important, so obsessed with our own egos, that we simply cannot fathom a universe that continues to exist without us to witness it. We think our individual daily consciousness is so incredibly vital to the functioning of the cosmos that it simply must be preserved forever in some ethereal, spiritual dimension. Why? Why must it? Think of a symphony. You go to a concert hall, and the orchestra plays Beethoven's Ninth. It is magnificent. It sweeps you up. It brings you to tears. It fills the room with complex, beautiful vibrations. And then it ends. The musicians pack up their instruments and go home. Do you demand that the symphony play forever, infinitely, without stopping in order for it to have had meaning? Of course not. The fact that the symphony has a beginning, a middle, and an end is part of its structure. Its fleeting nature is exactly what makes it beautiful and precious. I look at a human life the exact same way. The fact that it is temporary is what gives it its immense value. We have this tiny, incredibly brief window of light, maybe 80 or 90 years if we are very, very lucky, sandwiched between two impossibly vast eternities of darkness. You were completely dead, unconscious, and non-existent for 13.8 billion years before you were born, and it didn't bother you in the slightest. You will be dead for billions of years after you pass away. This one life, this fleeting spark of biological consciousness, is your one and only chance. It is your only chance to learn, to love, to explore, to laugh, to suffer, to help others, and to figure out how the universe works. If you genuinely believe that this physical life is just a temporary waiting room, a mere dress rehearsal for an eternal paradise, you might not take it as seriously. You might tolerate injustice or squander your time thinking, oh, it doesn't matter, the real reward comes after I die. But if you deeply, truly know that this is it, that this is the one and only show, you are compelled by the laws of basic decency to make it magnificent. You are compelled to treat others well, because this is their only chance at existence too. I want to be very clear about something. I am not saying that religious people are stupid. Far from it. That's a cheap, intellectually lazy argument. Some of the most brilliant, paradigm-shifting minds in the history of human civilization were deeply, obsessively religious. Take Isaac Newton, arguably the greatest physicist who ever lived. He invented calculus, formulated the laws of motion, and explained universal gravitation. But Newton spent more time secretly writing bizarre theological treatises on biblical prophecy and alchemy than he did on physics. He was deeply religious. But here is the fascinating thing about Newton. He was brilliant in spite of his religious dogma, not because of it. When Newton was doing his physics, he was observing nature. He was calculating the orbits of the planets. He was mathematically rigorous. But when his math couldn't explain something, for instance, why the gravitational pull of the planets on each other didn't eventually cause the solar system to collapse into chaos over a long period of time, Newton hit the limit of his understanding. And what did he do? He invoked God. He literally wrote that God must occasionally step in and adjust the orbits of the planets to keep the system stable. God was the ultimate fallback. God was the answer for whatever Newton didn't understand yet. In theology, we call this the God of the gaps. But look at what happened next. 100 years later, the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace comes along. He takes Newton's mathematics, refines them, develops perturbation theory, and proves mathematically that the solar system is inherently stable without needing any divine intervention. When Napoleon asked Laplace why he didn't mention God in his massive book on celestial mechanics, Laplace famously replied, "I had no need of that hypothesis. This is the inherent danger of the God of the gaps. As science progresses, the gaps get smaller. Thousands of years ago, we didn't know what caused lightning or thunder, so we invented Zeus throwing thunderbolts from Mount Olympus and Thor smashing his hammer in the clouds. It was an explanation that comforted us. But then we discovered electromagnetism, atmospheric pressure, and electrostatic discharge. Suddenly, Zeus and Thor were completely out of a job. They were retired to the realm of mythology. We didn't know how the incredible, staggering diversity of life on Earth came to be. We couldn't imagine how something as complex as a human eye could exist without a watchmaker to design it. So we said God meticulously designed every single species by hand, but then Charles Darwin sailed on the Beagle, looked at the finches, and discovered evolution by natural selection. We suddenly realized that nature didn't need a top-down designer. It just needed massive amounts of time, genetic mutation, and environmental pressure. The complexity was built from the bottom up. Every single time science makes a new discovery, the domain of God shrinks. If you base your religious faith on the things we do not yet understand, your God is in a state of constant retreat, constantly being pushed further and further into the shadows by the relentless light of scientific inquiry. That is a very, very insecure foundation for belief. Some people try to adapt. They say, okay, fine, God doesn't throw the lightning and God didn't manually design the finch, but God created the Big Bang. God is the spark that started it all. Maybe, but that is retreating to the very edge of the universe. It's putting God in the ultimate final gap, the origin of the cosmos itself. And while cosmologists and theoretic physicists haven't completely figured out the exact mechanism of the Big Bang yet, we are working on it. We are looking into quantum gravity, string theory, the multiverse. What happens when we close that gap too? Where does God go then? So where does that leave us as modern, rational human beings if we strip away the myths, the comforting stories, the eternal rewards, and the divine watchers? Are we just complex biological machines running on a wet computer made of meat, floating blindly in a universe devoid of absolute purpose? Maybe. And my question to you is, what if we are? Why is that so terrible? People ask me, Professor Feynman, if the universe has no grand design, no ultimate objective purpose given to it by a creator, then what is the meaning of life? Why go on? This is the great secret. This is the beautiful, liberating realization that comes with finally letting go of the ancient myths. The universe doesn't have an intrinsic objective meaning written in giant glowing letters across the sky. The universe just is. It exists. It follows its rules. It expands, it cools, it burns, it dies. Meaning is not something you find hidden under a rock or written in a cosmic scroll. Meaning is something you create. We, the conscious apes, are meaning-making machines. We give our lives meaning. We give it meaning through our relationships with others, through the children we raise, through the art we create, the music we compose, the kindness we show to strangers. And for me, at least, we give it meaning through the relentless, passionate pursuit of understanding how nature works. The universe doesn't care about us at all, but we care about each other. And that is enough. It has to be enough. I have a very, very different attitude toward the great questions of existence than the theologians do. The theologian is completely terrified of doubt. The theologian desperately needs an absolute answer, even if the answer is completely invented, because they cannot bear the psychological weight of not knowing. They want the safety net. But me, I can live with doubt. I can live with uncertainty. I can live with not knowing. I think it is vastly more interesting, vastly more exciting to live not knowing than to have answers which might be dead wrong. I have approximate answers and possible beliefs and different degrees of certainty about different things. I am fairly certain about quantum electrodynamics because the math matches the experiments to 10 decimal places. I am less certain about string theory, but I am not absolutely 100% sure of anything. And there are many, many things I don't know anything about at all, such as whether it even means anything to ask why we are here. The question why implies intent. How did we get here is a scientific question. Why are we here? Might just be a linguistic mistake, a relic of our human tendency to project intention onto a blind universe. I don't have to know an answer. I don't feel frightened by not knowing things, by being lost in a completely mysterious, mathematically savage universe without any clear purpose, which is the way it really, truly appears to be, as far as I can tell. It doesn't frighten me. In fact, it entirely liberates me. Think of the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of a religious system that claims to possess the absolute truth, to stand on a tiny, fragile speck of blue dust orbiting a boring star in the middle of a universe containing 2 trillion galaxies and spanning 93 billion light years, and to confidently say, I know exactly who created all of this, I know exactly what he wants me to eat on Thursday, and I know exactly what happens to my consciousness after the electrical activity in my brain stops. It's preposterous. It's a laughable insult to the vastness, the complexity, and the majesty of nature. The true scientific attitude is one of deep, profound, almost overwhelming humility. We look up at the cosmos, we look down into the quantum foam, and we say, we don't know. We have figured out a few things, sure. We know about electromagnetism. We know how to split the atom. We know about gravity curving space. We know about the strong and weak nuclear forces. We have built tools that allow us to see the cosmic microwave background radiation from the birth of the universe. We have unlocked the sequence of the human genome. We've done a lot of incredibly good, clever work. Humanity should be proud of itself, but the total amount of our knowledge, the sum total of everything we have figured out in the last 400 years of the scientific revolution, is just a tiny, microscopic drop of water in a vast, endless ocean of total ignorance. And that right there, that is where the real adventure lies. If religion were completely true, the adventure would be entirely over. Everything is already written in the old book. The rules are set. The origin is known. The destination is known. All you have to do is read the book, blindly obey the rules, suppress your curiosity, and wait to die so you can go to the promised paradise. How incredibly, painfully boring. It's like reading a mystery novel where someone circled the killer's name on the first page. But because the universe is an open mystery, because there are still massive structural secrets hiding in the quantum foam, in the event horizons of black holes, and in the mysterious dark energy that is actively tearing the cosmos apart, the adventure is just beginning. We get to be the detectives of the cosmos. We get to turn over the cosmic rocks and see what's scurrying underneath. We get to build bigger particle accelerators, bigger space telescopes, and push the boundaries of human understanding further and further into the dark unknown. And you know what the most fascinating, beautifully frustrating part of it all is? Every single time we solve a mystery, the answer we find usually uncovers 3 more mysteries we never even knew existed. We figured out that galaxies are moving away from each other. Great. We solved it. The universe is expanding, probably from a big bang. But wait, then in the 1990s, we looked closer. We measured the light from distant supernovas, and we realized the expansion isn't just happening. It is accelerating. The galaxies are flying apart faster and faster every single day. Why? What invisible force is pushing the universe apart? We have absolutely no idea. We call it dark energy, which sounds very sophisticated, but is literally just a fancy placeholder name for we haven't got a damn clue what this is. It makes up 68% of the universe, and we don't know what it is. That is the thrill of it. The universe is a puzzle that gets bigger the more pieces you put together. Now, as we push further and further down this road, as we drill deeper toward the ultimate foundational laws of physics, a very strange and provocative question arises. Some of my colleagues in theoretical physics deeply believe that eventually, if we do enough math and build enough colliders, we will find the theory of everything, a single, elegant, unified mathematical equation, maybe an inch long, that explains all the forces of nature. Gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces all tied up in one neat little package. They think we will eventually reach the absolute bottom of the well of knowledge. If we find that ultimate theory, will we finally find the God of the philosophers? Will that 1-inch equation truly be the mind of the Creator? I don't know. But frankly, I strongly suspect that nature is far more clever, far more imaginative, and far more relentless than that. Nature's imagination always outstretches man's imagination. Every single time human beings think we have boxed nature into a neat little corner, every time we think we have found the absolute, fundamental, indivisible building block of reality, nature laughs in our faces and opens a trapdoor beneath us. We thought the atom was indivisible. The word atom literally means uncuttable in Greek. Then we smashed it, and we found electrons orbiting a dense nucleus. Okay, we thought the nucleus is the bottom. Then we smashed the nucleus, and we found protons and neutrons. Aha! The fundamental particles. But then we smashed the protons together at nearly the speed of light, and what did we find? Quarks. What is inside a quark? What is a quark actually made of? Is it a point particle? Is it a vibrating string of multidimensional energy, as the string theorists claim? Are they loops of quantum space-time? We do not know. It's like an endless, infinite set of Russian nesting dolls. And every time you open one doll, the doll inside is not just smaller, it's playing by a completely different set of physical rules. So I want to leave you with a thought that might keep you awake tonight. Not with fear, not with the existential dread of eternal damnation, but with an insatiable, burning, irrepressible curiosity. You came here, you listened to this screen looking for a definitive answer about God, about religion, and about the ultimate nature of the universe. You wanted to know what is waiting at the very end of the long road of discovery. But what if the absolute greatest secret of the cosmos is that there is no end to the road at all? What if the universe is not a crossword puzzle waiting to be finally solved, but an infinitely deep fractal of complexity? What if every single answer we ever find is merely a doorway into a deeper, but vastly more profound mystery? Imagine a future, millions of years from now. Imagine that human beings somehow survive our own stupidity. Our descendants have spread out across the stars. They are exploring the farthest reaches of the galactic superclusters. They are manipulating matter and energy at scales we literally cannot fathom. They have built technologies that look like pure magic to us. What if, after millions of years of scientific progress, they are standing on the precipice of existence, still asking the exact same fundamental questions? Why is there something rather than nothing? Imagine reaching out to grasp the absolute final truth of existence, expecting to finally pull back the curtain and see the face of the ultimate creator, or the final, elegant one-inch equation of everything, only to pull back the curtain and find, well, would you like to find out? Keep looking, keep asking, keep doubting every single absolute truth you are ever handed, because the exact moment you convince yourself that you finally know the answer, that is the exact moment you stop seeing the magic. Thank you.